Real quick before we get started, we thought we knew what we were getting into. This is a lot, but I encourage you to watch the whole thing and learn a little bit about these engines and how they come apart, so when you go to do it on yours, you have a better understanding. Some of my lingo is off, so don't judge, and it's a little bit painful for some of the parts because it's hard to film and you can't really get a certain angle in there. We were supposed to have enough time to do everything on camera, but we did not have enough time to do the blow-off valve install, the intake, or the fuel pump because we were crammed on time and we were in someone else's shop. So I'm gonna leave some links below to videos that I use to help me install these things, and I hope for the next car, which we'll probably do another Subaru on the channel eventually in the sometime near future, we will for sure do that now that we have a better understanding on how to do it. But we're just crunched on time, so I apologize. Time code on screen right now to certain spots of the video if you want to skip ahead, but if you want to learn the whole thing, I just encourage you to watch throughout. What up guys, welcome to another video. Today we're at Good Speed Performance, so shout out to Joe and John for letting me and Trevor come out here to do this mega job that I want to show you guys exactly how to do in your garage. I was very intimidated by it, but let me break it down and simplify it. So with the 2015 now to 2019 STi, you have an EJ engine, which is 2019 is the last year apparently for that engine, is the rumor. So you get stuck at getting a catless downpipe, and then you have a stage 2 off the shelf mat from Cobb, and then you're stuck. Then you're starving for fuel. The car needs some fuel upgrades, and to do fuel upgrades, you pretty much entails this. So now now that we're gonna have enough fuel, we can do an intake. So we're gonna install the intake, we're gonna install 1050 cc injector dynamics injectors, and then we're gonna do a fuel pressure regulator system, which is what this is right here. But we're actually gonna do a Y block, it's called. Joe is a specialist on Subarus here at Good Speed, and they actually have their own Y block, it's called, for the fuel issue, and it's apparently, he says, they get better fuel pressure readings with this Y block. So I will get more details on that as we get into it. But yeah, so basically Joe just told me we're gonna take the intake out, we're gonna take the air pump out, we're gonna take the battery out, we've got to take the intercooler off, and there is a crash bar for the injectors, so if you get in an accident, it doesn't throw fuel everywhere with the injectors breaking, and we're gonna take that rail completely out and leave it out. So we have our hands full. Oh, we also got to take the AC compressor and move it forward, so we got to do spark plugs as well. It's going to be a huge job, but we're going to try and break it down as simple as possible and give you guys some confidence to do it in your own garage. Starting with the battery, 10mm right here. Just go ahead and get this bracket off. You can kind of get it hand loose. Flathead screwdriver with these plastic clips. These aren't budging, so you kind of got to pry on them. I'm gonna grab my tool. Let's get started on the intercooler. So you'll see these lines right here. There's two 10mm bolts that go into the intercooler, so we're gonna go ahead and get those started. Get the one on the left. There's two bolts on the side of the intercooler that hold it on, and this guy right here, this is what sends the intake sound into the cabin to kind of give you some turbo noise inside. We're gonna disconnect this. Should just slide out. And then this is out of the way of that bolt we need to get to. Pull it all the way off. There's a 10mm bolt right here. You kind of got to slide in here. This is just the beginning of things getting awkward working on this engine. We're actually just going to delete this today. There is a clamp holding this line on. I'm just going to go ahead and pinch it. This is what sends that turbo sound from your intake into your cabin. It's like, not very cool compared to a real blow-off valve. Got your channel lock still. Gonna pull off the other piece of that tube that goes to the cabin. Slide it out nice and gently. Cool. I'm actually gonna pull this off too, so we don't lose it. We're gonna continue to take the intake off, and there's two 10mm bolts right here that hold the bracket on. Don't lose these, you can drop them easily. I'm gonna go ahead and put these nuts back on where I just took them off so we don't lose them. Now we're gonna grab our flathead screwdriver and disconnect the intake box. And then we're gonna take this tube off. Let's pull these guys out of the way. These are lines for our coolant. And this can disconnect right there. And then undo this guy. Cool. Now we should have room. Let's get our MAF sensor off real quick. Don't lose these little screws, they can fall too. For safety precautions, we're gonna disconnect it. So we can put this somewhere safe because you do not want to get that dirty. Also, I forgot to mention earlier, we have an HKS blow-off valve to install, so that'll be super fun. 10 millimeter as well. This is to finish taking the stock air box out. It's down here in the crack. You got to get in there. All right, we can now pull this box out. And like again, I'm gonna take this bolt right here, and I'm actually gonna put it back into the frame so we don't lose it. What is this big tank for on the bottom of the intake? Well, if you drove through a massive puddle of water or something all seasons thing, Subaru things, the water is gonna go in the intake and drain into this tank instead of just stay in your intake and then get sucked into the engine. So this is kind of like a safety thing, which we're not gonna have anymore, but it's a good design. Let's take the intercooler off all the way, the 2 bolts on the side of it, 12 millimeter. Got an extension to help me out. One more on the other side, same thing. Be gentle, don't drop it. We're gonna pull off the bypass valve. I got a little bigger of a wrench, so I have some more leverage. Oh, I broke it loose already. Let's do this one. Awesome, now this is separated. Let's get our gasket right here and save it from getting lost. That one's loose. This one's loose.
Take this bracket off because it gets in the way.
Oh, take it off.
Yeah,
Okay.
take those two.
You have to loosen the red hose on the intercooler on the lower part as well and remove the bracket that holds the right side of the intercooler in place so you have more wiggle room. The intercooler can be hard to get out, but once you move the bracket on the right, you loosen the hose on the bottom that's red, you'll be good to go. Okay, got that bracket out.
Jam that in front of that, and then kind of just push down like this. And it pops out like that.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it pulls off. Can I see the back of that real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, this is what's holding on. Got it.
Yeah, so
This bracket that we just took off is right next to the blow-off valve like this. We pulled that off, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the 2 bolts back in the intake manifold so we don't lose them. Putting our intercooler bolts back on the left side of the engine. So this is the second one. Slide it in our bracket, leave it there, and then also don't forget about these 2 10 millimeter ones we're going to put in the bottom of our intercooler again so we don't lose them. And then we have 2 more. Take our gasket, put our bypass valve bolts back in here. Don't lose them. It's in the car like this, so you can see this red pipe right here, and then you just loosen it, and then you can slide it out. Just confirm that if there's oil in your intercooler, it's just Subaru things, and not to stress. Off the air pump now, 12 millimeter, got the extension. Let's just start. There's some wires we gotta take off too, but I'm gonna get it out of the way. One more behind the dipstick. I got needle nose pliers because I got this bolt in the back by the dipstick all the way loose, and I'm gonna grab it with needle nose and pull it out so I don't drop it. There's a couple clips we gotta get out of the way. This guy I kind of figured out, I don't know if this is the right way, but it's how I'm doing it. You can kind of wiggle it in there, get your screwdriver in between, and then push it up with your finger, and then you can slide it out of the way. And then over here, there's a clip, there's a plug actually. We moved the air pump back a little bit. We got this cable above out of that clip, and now there was a little bracket where this plug sits in right here, and we pulled it out of the way. So you gotta flip it and do 180, and there's a tab on the back side. You pull that, and then that will let this out. It looks like there's a clip on the top side, but there really isn't. And yeah, so there it is right here, that tab. You press on the back, and then it comes out real easy. Let's get the hose clamp off. Now our air pump is out. This is what the air pump looks like. think so. Yeah, you're right. Let's put our bolt back where it belongs. Go ahead and just pull off the alternator and then move the AC compressor forward. It's gonna be easier. The first thing we're gonna do is this belt tensioner right here. We're gonna go to the lower bolt and stick our 12 millimeter and break that loose. And then on the top, we're gonna loosen it. The belt doesn't loosen right away because the alternator moves itself and becomes the tensioner for the whole belt. So you don't have like a direct tensioner like a V8 sometimes. This alternator is holding the belt tight, so it's not gonna shift right away. So we gotta loosen the other bolts first. Disconnecting our alternator cable, press down on that, pull up, and then we're gonna take that off. 12 millimeter to get this guy off. Up is we have our 12 millimeter right here, in between the compressor and the alternator. Now our alternator just got loose. Good sign. Now hold the nut on the other side right here so it doesn't slide off the back. This bolt goes all the way through. Now we can keep loosening this guy a lot more. So the alternator is going to have some more room to get it out from underneath the belt. Thanks, Trevor. Actually, just going to take this all the way out. Hold the bottom of it. Now let's pull this guy out. Okay, let's put this guy back in here. Set it over here. Pulling up on the alternator, and then right up here up top, there's a plastic clip. You gotta pull out of the back of it. Alternator, we got our alternator up out of the way. Now we can get to our clip right here. It feels like you need to push down on the edge right here, but you need to put farther down on your thumb. Push down and then pull it out. Trevor had to help me. Took two of us. You push down on the top of this, pull it out. Be careful with it, small wires. And then we can move this whole wiring out of the way. So now we can see what's going on. Let's start with this guy. Can't even get to it, that sucks. Guy back here, we've got a 14 millimeter ratcheting wrench, which is nice to have. Awkward position, but we'll get it. Check this out. You can see the EJ25 on the motor now. Next up is this bolt right here, 14 millimeter as well. Trevor just took a digger, trying to get that loose. Hit his hand on this arm.
Look at that, it's freaking...
Down here by the dipstick, it's another part of our bracket. It's by the black bracket. I got it hand loose now. One of the last bolts on the back side of the compressor, you don't even need to look in there with the camera, it's impossible. Look at this mechanism. This is what it took for us to get it off, thanks to Joe. He hooked it up with the parts here at good speed. We have a knuckle right here, 14 millimeter extension, and like a breaker bar style ratchet, but it's such at an awkward angle. This is what it took. So be prepared to run into this issue when you get into this process. Trevor brought up a good point. We did all the bolts around it first, and this belt is pulling down on that AC compressor, making the bolt in the back that we were just talking about the most difficult. So maybe if you do this one first when you do it, it's gonna be much easier to break loose and you might not need a contraption like this. But now that we have this loose, let's go ahead and slide this compressor forward. We're onto the stage now of pulling the fuel rail protectors off, like I had mentioned earlier. We're gonna take this off with the 12 millimeter. I already broke it loose. Ooh, let's take this top guy off right here too. And then there's another one right above it. Got this guy loose. Now under this hose, or I mean wiring harness, there's a 12mm bolt, and the only way really to get to it is with a wrench. Luckily we have these ratcheting wrenches. Trevor pointed out yet again for me that you can pull the whole wiring harness. You really pry on it, you can get to the bolt, so we're just hitting it with this extension now, so don't waste your time like I did earlier. You need to take the TGV off. There's a 10mm on top where my finger's pointing at. There's one on the bottom, so Trevor and I were able to see the bottom with an extension by putting his phone down there and guiding it all the way to the bolt. That took 2 of us, so things are getting hairy, but I hope this is a clear understanding still so you guys know what to do. TGV, 210s, got it out of the way. Bottom one's still in there a little bit, and there's a 12mm for this bracket my finger's on, down in there. It's awful. Down there at 12, right?
You see it right there?
Yeah, you can kind of see it. So up is this bracket over the fuel rail. Okay, let's work our way to the back. Now back here is another awful spot, which you can see it sliding around now. We already took it out because it's getting really hard to film right now. So there's one 12 right there in between all these hoses and everything by this coolant line. So now we're to the point now where we take the 12 on this guy right here. For our intercooler bracket, we're gonna take our intercooler bracket off. That's connected to our fuel rail guard. Okay, now we gotta disconnect this zip tie for the wiring harness to the intercooler mount. We're gonna cut that so we can pull this all the way out. On the back down here, it's a lower 12mm. We're still trying to get the fuel rail guard off. I can't even show you on camera. You guys are gonna have to figure it out. It's simple. Trevor was able to get the back bolt off. That was a 12mm for this bracket. So now this bracket's loose, but we're still held up by this guy right here. So we're gonna break this line, this hard line loose right now with a 17mm, just so we can get it out of the way. We have to be super careful.
Grab that washer.
The gold? Oh yeah, yeah. Make sure you grab the copper washer. Okay, you don't want to pull on this line, this hard line, too much. But I'm just gonna do it just enough to get that bolt out. Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put this guy back just temporarily. We're gonna end up pulling this off, so I'm just gonna leave that loose like that. Let's see what's gonna... Now this is what protects the fuel rail in case of an accident, you don't have an explosion. But they told us that they cut this off right here, so there's no need to cover this, and that's a telltale way. Cody told me, he said, hey, when you look under the engine of a car, if you're able to, you're looking at used Subarus, you can look underneath, and if you see this fuel rail exposed and you see this guard right here, it's cut like this. We'll cut it right now today, but this is cut off and this is exposed. You know that the car has been worked on, it's had injectors done and things like that. So that's something to be aware of. But for now, the back half of this is necessary and important to keep because this is what mounts that bracket for the intercooler. So you keep the back half, cut the front half, easy exposed part for the injectors. So now we got to get this thing off the other side, and we should be getting close to getting ready to take spark plugs and injectors out. The engine, we're gonna take this guy. Trevor already broke it loose, and then you pull up on it, still tight, down straight through there. There's another one, but
you can see it if you follow my finger.
that's kind of hard to see.
Down through that hole.
We have all of the bolts off for the shield on the fuel rail, but we have this issue where we can't finagle it out. So what we got to do is, this is the air pump, and the air pump is plastic clip we'll insert here, is a pump that pumps air into the exhaust at cold start because there's more gas and raw, or there's more raw gases or whatever you call it from the motor that's bad for the atmosphere at cold start than there is at normal temperature. So that air pump is just forcing air into the exhaust to even out the gases so it's not as bad. So you can actually just delete that. Not good for the atmosphere, but there's no reason to even have it under here, under the hood or anything like that. So I'm actually just gonna, to make space and just get rid of it in general, there's a 10 millimeter. It's a 10 millimeter bolt we're gonna take off. Air pump is out of the way, so we can kind of push this down. There's a connector back there, so you can't like slide it out or anything. But next you need a 10 millimeter again to remove the oil fill. And then it's 2 bolts. There's another 10 millimeter right here. After we got those 2, break it loose, and then this whole thing should come off. Let's see what happens. So, fuel rail is exposed. You can see the fuel rail, my finger's on it. There's 2 bolts right up here that we need to take off, and hopefully the injectors come with it at that point. So they're 12 millimeter bolts, and we're gonna take them all the way out. You do not have to pull the fuel rails completely out of the engine bay. Slide the injectors out of the side, so they're like, kind of, you pull up on the fuel rail and then slide the injector out. Be very gentle with it, but you don't have to like pull it all the way out. It would be time consuming. Okay, now we got the bolts out. We're ready to pull the injectors out and the whole rail.
Pull up out of the way. You're probably gonna have to bend this fuel rail just a little bit. So I'll get you a bungee, and the bungee will hold this up out of the way.
Fuel rail again, we need to cut off this zip tie right here. So then we can move these wires. Now we have some space to work with. And let's bend the fuel rail out. This one seems like it's getting hung up. Oh, it's hung up by this hard line right here. You can come in. Okay, cool.
Is that injector?
Got it.
There's the injector.
Awesome. Upper O-ring is on. The lower grommet, the black piece?
Yes.
Okay, so both of them are good.
Mm-hmm.
And then these just...
Those just slide on.
If you notice the injectors are black, it's because they're injector dynamic 1000s, not 1050Xs, which they should have been. You know that because the red cap on top. I found out once we were installing them. I bought them from a guy secondhand that had low miles on them. His car blew up, and he told me they're 1050, but they're not. But it's whatever. I should have known when I bought it, but they're still good injectors.
It's just Seal Glide.
Okay.
It's just
So you put this on the seal?
silicone paste.
Do I put it on this?
Put it on both O-rings, the top and the bottom O-ring. Point the back. The one in the back should point to the back. The one in the front should point.
Do you
to
see
the
how this one's pointing? The injectors, when you're putting them in, kind of go at an angle like this. So if we're looking at the engine right here, or if you're looking at the fuel rail, the injectors don't really slide like into anything. They kind of just like have a hole and they like pop in, and then the fuel rail holds on top. So I don't feel like it's like you have to like jam it in there or anything. That's what the fuel rail has, those bolts to hold it on tight. And then make sure when you're looking at the fuel rail that the injector plugs kind of face out like this, or like the original stock ones were. So it's kind of important you have them in this similar position so you can get the plugs right, everything fits right. We have the injectors in, thanks to Joe. I'm gonna put these in very carefully, the bolts to hold the fuel rail, and Joe instructed me to make sure they're not cross-threaded or sideways at all. Joe put a piece of paper, and then we put the bolt, and then it stays in there. Paper trick again over the bolt's head. Got the other bolt hole. We just got the fuel rail tightened on. It's a struggle and it's very tight space, hard to film, very hard to film. But now we have our quick plugs, plug and play set up for our injectors. Snapped on, good to go. Did this one down here, and we're ready to move on to the other side, which we won't film, it's the same thing. And after that, we need to work on getting our spark plugs changed. Next step, put new spark plugs in for a new tune. And anytime you get a tune, you want to put new spark plugs in. And obviously with the boxer engine, they're on the side down there. And I'm not going to get in there and get all crazy, but the far one, we have a 3/8 ratchet with 12 millimeter, plop in there sideways, got it loose. The one in the front, I used an extension with a wobbly or a knuckle and got in there and broke it loose. So now we can get in there past the cover for the electrical, and now we can get into the actual spark plug. The spark plugs, the coil on top has a bolt that holds it into the block. You can loosen that bolt until it's like spinning freely. You don't have to pull it out. So you just loosen it till it's spinning free and then pull the whole coil out. It has a little sleeve that the bolt sits in. So normally you'd think, I'm gonna loosen the bolt and then pull it completely out and then pull the coil out. Loosen it till it spins and it's gonna sit right there and then pull the whole coil out. You kinda have to wiggle it out. Now we're moving on to the fuel lines and adding the Y block. This is the crash bar for the fuel rails on the passenger side. And like I had mentioned earlier, this side covers the fuel rail and this side is the part that you need moving back. And there's another piece of metal that hangs out for the intercooler. So we're gonna cut it right here so we no longer have this over the fuel rail. So if we ever have to touch it again, it's not a problem, and just putting it back is just a nightmare. So we'd rather just cut it off. Today we kind of hit a point where we need to stop. We're gonna finish the Y block tomorrow and put everything back, but I wanted to open up this blow-off valve before we leave. This is the HKS. This has my favorite sound. One of my favorite sounds that comes out of a car in general, and to have it on my own car, I'm really excited. So, let's see. Swing. We got a radio antenna. Just kidding. But yeah. And then with this car, we need an adapter plate, which is one of these two. I'm not gonna mess with it now. So this mounts to here, and then this goes on our intercooler. Probably sticks up like that, and then makes some good noises. So catch you guys tomorrow.
Start with taking this piece off. Take all 3 of these clamps off.
Okay.
I'll grab a tool to make that easier for you.
Okay.
Basically, we're deleting this hose because this is the return and this is returning it back to here to feed. But it's a series system, so it goes through this rail and then goes through to this rail and then goes back. So basically, we're going to take this hose and delete it, and this hose and delete it, and take another piece of hose from here and feed it to here, so that feeds the other rail, and this is the return off of this rail, and we'll put that to here.
Got it.
And so it just makes it's splitting the fuel system.
Okay. Cody went through it. It makes kind of sense, but Joe's going to explain in a little bit the exact details of the fuel system. This is the hose that goes to the rail.
Yeah, this one's going to feed the passenger side.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the factory fuel system, the way it's designed, is a byproduct of the way it's designed, causes an oscillation about 3,000, 3,500 RPM, which can cause a stumble.
And you can feel it when you're driving.
And you can feel it when you're driving. So what we do is we'll use a high flow Y here, and then we'll, instead of running the fuel rails in series, we'll run them in parallel. So basically the fuel comes in, breaks off into a Y here. One side feeds one side of the fuel rail, the other side feeds the other fuel rail. And then it returns back to the factory regulator. We get very solid fuel pressure at both rails, equal pressure at both rails, and it completely eliminates the fuel pressure oscillation.
So this line right here on this side goes down into...
This one goes and feeds the driver's side fuel rail.
Right.
Then this side comes around and then it goes underneath the rail and feeds the passenger side fuel rail.
Right, so it's going behind the compressor and then over here straight to it, so it's two straight lines to it.
Yes.
And then the return that he rerouted, it's returning from this side now instead of that side?
Well, so basically the passenger side fuel rail and the driver's side fuel rail will come back to the factory fuel pressure regulator, and that portion works as normal. The fuel pressure regulator works as was designed. Our system actually utilizes the factory fuel pressure regulator, which you don't have to buy. Some of the other kits require you to purchase an earlier version fuel pressure regulator, and those systems also run their fuel rails in series, where the fuel gets fed to the driver's side fuel rail first, then the passenger side fuel rail, and then back to the regulator. Ours runs the fuel system in parallel, which equalizes the pressure between driver's side and passenger side fuel rail.
Cool. Thank you for simplifying that. It was kind of a lot when Cody came in here and did that, so I hope that makes sense how you reroute it.
He's done a few of them, so he can knock them out pretty quick.
Right, just for the sake of them seeing it, I just wanted to clarify it. This is the point where we put everything back. We've kind of got our bolts and everything organized properly, so we're not going to show every step of this because you saw us pull it apart. When you take it apart yourself, you should be able to know how to put it back, I hope. So we're going to show you when we get everything together, and then we can start with the intake. So go over everything, make sure you put everything back that you think you needed to. You've got your alternator, your AC compressor, your fuel rails, you've got your intercooler piping, your intake, your fuel pump, all those little bolts. Make sure everything's good. We got our base map on the access port from our tuner, and we're about to start it for the first time. Fuel pump is in, blow off valve's on. We got it carried away because we were crunched on time. We wanted to get it done. I'm going to leave some links below to some videos that are helpful that I used to install it. So I wish this video was even more in depth, but I hope we got the hard part on video to show you. But we are on to the tuning process now. Marin is here about to tune it and maybe get some horsepower. And I found out that the injectors I bought from a kid were Injector Dynamics 1000s, not 1050. Kind of a bummer. Kid screwed me over on Facebook, so that's what I get for buying something used, and I recommend double checking. The 1050s have red caps and the 1000s have black, so these are fine. It's plenty for now. It'll give us some numbers, but if we want to do anything crazier in the future, we're going to do 1050s and change them. So now we're on to the tuning process. Just finished tuning. Marin's gonna take us for a ride, dialing the tune a little bit more with some actual temps on the road. Marin, formally introduced you in our video.
Hi.
How long you been tuning?
15 years.
A long time, so we trust him. And he's got crazy stuff on his computer. He's got his maps. He's a wizard. Thank you. I appreciate you. Marin, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate you.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. I'm wrapping up the video. Thank you.
Sure, man.
I
We'll see you
appreciate
later.
your expertise.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
When I had to wrap up the video, I did this to everyone. I want to say thank you, and I appreciate you. I'll see you soon. All right?
Yeah, always.
I had a lot of fun.
I'm glad you had fun.
Did you?
Dude, I had so much fun.
Yeah,
I
just
had
giving
fun
us
watching
crap
you
the
have
whole
fun.
time.
Well, that's what I have fun doing.
Going over the final dyno numbers, everyone's so curious. Nothing exciting. We have 91 gas in Arizona, 91 octane. It's trash. We need a flex fuel kit and some ethanol to make some real numbers. But for now, with the AEM high pressure fuel pump, we got our ID 1000s, HKS blow-off valve, Cobb catless downpipe, NVIDIA N1 non-resonated cabback, single exit, and that's it. It put down on the screen, you can see the sheet, 290 horsepower peak and 294 foot-pounds of torque, so it did pretty well. Marin told me that when we get a front mount intercooler on, it should get to like around 300 with this kind of gas, and then with ethanol it's going to be way crazier. So flex fuel kit next. We got to do an air oil separator next on the car, and we'll be good to go. Put out some real numbers. Thank you so much, Goodspeed, for helping us out. Trevor and I could not have done it without you guys. Everyone there, Joe, John, Marin, Cody, Richard. It was a job and a half, and I think that anyone, if you're determined to do it and you have this knowledge and you go watch other videos and stuff, you could totally do it. I apologize that we weren't able to get the fuel pump and the blow-off valve and the intake install. We were crammed on time. The tuner was waiting on us. Like, it just was impossible since we weren't in our own space. What do you guys want to see next on the Subaru? We're just getting back into working on it. So what are some little things, maybe exterior or engine or whatever? Comment down below what you think. Also, comment down below some questions you have for the tuner. If you made it to this point, I'm going to be doing a sit-down video with the tuner and ask them all these questions that everyone needs to know. So comment down below, and that's it. I appreciate you guys watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.